I wasn't always this handsome. In 2001, I was about 25 kilos heavier than I am today. I was a heavy smoker. I worked in advertising, and I looked like the sort of guy who's worked in advertising and has had one too many pizzas at his desk at midnight. And at the same time, I found out about this amazing new charity that had started here in the UAE called Gulf for Good. And the idea behind the charity was really simple. It was to encourage people who lived and worked here in the Gulf to help do good for people in less fortunate areas of the world through adventure challenges and fundraising. And it is a really interesting concept because, alhamdulillah, like, we're so blessed in this country that we don't know what it means to be hungry or to live in fear or to be grateful for simple things like running water. And the idea was that there's so many of us here who have an obligation to try and help those less fortunate around the world. And what they did was they organized these amazing charity adventures to places like Kilimanjaro in Tanzania. And all you had to do was raise money and go on these adventures. And so I signed up. And all I had to do was raise 12,000 dirhams, get fit, and go on the trip. Easy peasy, right? Wrong. I didn't get fit, I didn't raise the money, and I didn't go on the trip. But it awoke something inside me, and quite literally a few days later, I woke up on my couch at 3 in the morning with back pain, and I was walking towards the fridge to get something sweet to drink, and I realized something then. I wasn't gonna become a fat old man. I was 26, and I had already become one. And I knew that something had to change. I had to change. So I started exercising, losing weight, and so on. And 2 years later, I went back to Gulf for Good with a little bit more discipline this time. And I said, can I go on a trip? And they were still a bit doubtful about me, but I raised the money, and I went on the trip. And the first trip we did, oh, thank you. Well, the first trip I did was to Jabal Tubqal in Morocco. Which is an amazing place. It's the highest mountain in North Africa. And the money we raised was going to benefit the SOS Children's Village at the foothills of the mountain. And if you don't know, SOS Children's Village is one of the world's largest children's charities. They provide homes for 65,000 orphaned and abandoned children around the world every day. And they also help families at risk in places like Gaza, where they've had their lives destroyed, and they need someone to help them put it back together. And the money we raised helped build a computer lab there. And I really wasn't prepared for this, you know, and I went on this trip, and one of the things I always say is that when you trek at altitude, you need to be aware of the sun. So most people take like factor 30 sun cream and a hat. I took my Ombre Solaire bronzage cream with me to work on my tan. And as you can see, I learned very quickly that that wasn't gonna work. And I remember crawling out of my tent the first morning, and I was freezing, and I had to go to the bathroom behind a rock. And I came back, and I turned to my friend Martin, and I said to him, I said, dude, I'm not cut out for this. I'm a city boy, not a country boy. But I did it. And for a week, we trekked through the mountains, and we talked, and we didn't have telephones, and we didn't have internet, and really just got to know all the people on the trip with us, and talked about life, and talked about love. And eventually, we reached our summit at the top of the mountain. And like they say, only when you've reached the peak can you see the other peaks that you can also accomplish. And so when I came back down off that mountain, I started doing other things. For example, I started running and doing like 10 kilometers, half marathons, full marathons, and so on. And I started doing a little bit of cave exploration. This, for example, is a picture I took in Oman, in a place called Majlis al-Jinn. It's the second largest cave chamber in the world. I mean, from that ray of sunlight to the bottom of the cave is 180 meters. And so you had to climb down a rope to get to the bottom of that cave. But you know, that's kind of where all these things started. And then I decided I was gonna run an ultra marathon. And this was me looking at the course. It's a 56-kilometer ultra marathon where you have to run over 2 mountains, and you have to do it in 7 hours. And if you don't finish in 7 hours, you don't get a finishing time, you don't get a medal. It's like you didn't even start. And anybody who's ever run a marathon can tell you the hard part is not the marathon. It's the 3 months of Sundays before the marathon when you come home from work at 8 o'clock and you're tired and all you want to do is lie on your couch or watch TV, but against your better judgment, you've got to put on your sneakers and go out and run 30 kilometers before you can have your dinner. And so I needed some help and I needed some motivation. And so I got it again in the form of the SOS Children's Village, this time a bit closer to home in Bethlehem. And this is what Palestine and Bethlehem looks like to a lot of people today. It's a place of injustice and it's a place of horrible concrete walls. But I found something else there. I found this beautiful haven of peace and tranquility where these beautiful children live, where they're being raised as a family. I mean, this man, for example, is actually one of the orphans that was raised in the orphanage at the SOS Children's Village. And the orphanage paid for his education, sent him to college, and he came back, and he now runs the orphanage and takes care of all the children, just like somebody took care of him before that. And it's amazing. I mean, these really are the most beautiful children in the world that I've ever seen. They really are amazing. And they helped me reach that next finish line. And then I started going on more Gulf for Good adventures. And one of the first ones, another one I went on was to the Amani children, was to climb Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania. And we stopped at the Amani Home for Children along the way. And this is a place for orphan and abandoned children. I mean, one of the kids we met there, called Dawoodi, was found tied to a pole in a bus station, abandoned by his mother, because he was autistic. And she hoped that maybe somebody could care about him and somebody could provide a better life for him. And people really do care about these beautiful children. They're provided with a wonderful life over there. And so after meeting them, we went up and we climbed the mountain. And the first summit you reach is this one. This is the lower summit at 5,600 meters. And at this point, you can actually see the curve of the earth from up there. It's the most amazing view. And if you trek on and you push a little harder, eventually you get to the summit and get to the peak of this mountain. And the money we raised with this charity trip bought 20 wheelchairs, built a children's consultation clinic at a hospital in Nairobi, and provided the building of 2 new rooms in the Amani home for these children. So every time we do something, we're doing something real for these people. Now, one of the nice things about these treks that I go on is the food and the things you discover along the way. And I went to Peru with my wife and a couple of friends once with Gulf for Good, and we tried to sample the local delicacy. And one of the local delicacies there is the guinea pig. And it's not really a pig, you know, haram. It's really more like it looks like a rabbit or a hamster, but it's a local delicacy. But the interesting thing about it is that we always make the effort to eat the local food, but those guinea pigs were so nasty that we had guinea pigs for lunch and we had McDonald's for dinner. Sorry, Doctor. So we went and visited these people, and so we went to see a charity outside the sacred city of Cusco. And this is the inside of the house of one of the families. And you can see the roof is black and dripping with soot and dripping with ash because these people cook inside their own homes. And it's such an unhealthy environment. And the only way the families here can make money is by raising guinea pigs and selling them for food. Their animals eat better than their own children do, because that's how poor and desperate these people are. And that's what poverty can do to you. And that's where our responsibility as human beings comes in, no matter where we are in the world. And these are the children we helped. And we got there and we painted the walls and we helped them, and we're now building them a school. So there's wonderful things that you can do. And then these are the sort of things that we wind up doing. So we're helping people and we're trying to save the world, but we're also seeing sights that we never thought we'd see. So some pretty amazing things. And one of the other trips I went on recently was a trip to Lebanon. And I actually took 21 Emirati students with me on a trek called In the Footsteps of Khalil Gibran, the famous Lebanese poet. And these were great kids. They're from good families, very well educated. And we all got in a plane and we flew to Beirut together. And I remember when we first arrived at the hotel in Beirut, we were staying at the Hotel Mozar, which is a 2-star hotel on Hamra Street in East Beirut. And we arrived and all the students were like, Ustaz, Shuhada, what is this? They're like, why can't we stay in the Phoenicia? And I was like, guys, we're a charity. We don't have money. They're like, Ustaz, we'll pay. We'll get our own rooms. We'll get you a room as well. But we stayed in the Hotel Mzar, and I took them to the Sabra and Shatila refugee camp, which is one of the most desperate places on earth where the 1948 Palestinian refugees live. And it was amazing watching the faces of these young students because they'd all been to Beirut before, but they'd never been to Sabra and Shatila. This was not downtown. This was not Solidaire. And it really, really touched them because they met people whose entire lives were based on the charity of others. People whose entire lives were based on the generosity and the giving of other people, many of whom they didn't know. And we met a man whose whole life was dedicated to trying to provide his children with education. Because the only way out of the 4 walls of that camp for his kids was through their education. It really touched these kids. And it was amazing, because we trekked through the north of Lebanon, through places like Bshirri and places like Ihden. We even walked into a cave on the side of a mountain. It was actually a sanctuary where Christian pilgrims had fled and hid from religious persecution. And there we were, me and 20 Emirati students sitting inside a church, listening to a nun talk to us about how we're all the children of God and we all live under the same sky. And it really opened up their eyes. And after a week of this, we visited the SOS village. And it really did. And after a week of this, we visited the SOS Children's Village, and we met more of the children that we were going to help. And then at the end of this trek, we went back to Beirut, back to the Hotel Mzar, and we were sitting there having lunch together, and we were all exhausted. We were all a little bit sunburned. But to a man, we were all inspired. And what I saw in them, and they started talking to me, asking what else they could do, how they could do the next thing. And I saw in them what I saw in myself 10 years ago, is that they had reached their peak, and they could see the next peaks that they could conquer. And so really, when I set out on this journey, I didn't realize I would become like them, one of the people who would accidentally be inspired along the way. And, by trying to set out to try to change myself, somehow in my own small way, I've managed to change the world as well. And so if you ask yourself what you need to do to help the world, sometimes the world doesn't need your money. It just needs a little bit of change. Thank you.